Hi, everyone. Before you listen to this weird conversation, Kip, Chesky, and I go into some spoilers for the following series: Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, Song of Shannara by Terry Brooks, The Expanse by James S.A. Corey, and The Saga of Recluse by L.E. Modisette. There is also some very minor spoilers for all the Tortel books by Tamara Paris as well. Hope you enjoy it.
I was what you are. You can become what I am.
Hi, this is Little Red Book, and welcome to The Green Team, a weird little spin-off podcast hosted by patrons of the Legendarium. Today, Cesky, Kyptan, and I will talk all magic all the time. Why did we fall in love with fantasy and magic? What are our favorite magic systems? What does a hard versus soft magic system mean? And what do we make of the endless subgenre rabbit holes we find in fantasy? We're not sure where this conversation is going, so maybe this episode should be called All Tangents All the Time. Gentlemen?
Hey.
Hey.
Hey. Great
Kip.
intro, Red. Love it.
Thank you. Thank you. So Kip, how'd you fall in love with magic?
Oh, gosh. I don't exactly remember my very first fantasy books, but it was probably the Magic School Bus. And
That's fair.
and I thought that the way that the Magic School Bus used imagination and make-believe technologies and little bits of, we'll call it magic, to both explain concepts and to explore thought experiments, like worlds with frictionless baseball games, pinball machines made out of light, all sorts of fun stuff. And I thought it was educational and mind expanding, and I've loved it ever since.
Chesky?
Sounds great. Well, mine is definitely much less scientific and smart. I started reading when I was young. I've always loved reading. One of my first fantasy ones I picked up was the Animorph series. It was a good story. I loved it. And then when I got to like middle school, I started actually looking for fantasy books and started with the Sword of Shannara. And then I've been hooked ever since.
Nice. So I grew up on the normal fairy tale fare, but I was still reading at a kindergarten-ish reading level when I was in the 3rd grade. And so I got glasses and some tutoring, and the first big girl books that I ever read were The Chronicles of Narnia. And the idea of walking through a closet into another world just captured me, and I've been a fantasy fan ever since. I mean, they're not the best books, and there's certainly a lot of series I'd like more, but they're
I mean,
definitely
maybe as a group, but there's some stellar examples there.
That's a very good entry point to fantasy for almost anyone.
right. Well, I went from I started
Especially a good Christian girl.
Shut up. No, this is true. But I mean, Neil Gaiman says that was his first entry point for sure.
It was definitely an early entry in my fantasy experience too, because it was required reading in 4th grade.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just read it on my own. I think my mom read it to me beforehand, but once I was able to actually read at the appropriate reading level, I think I read all 7 books in like 2 months, which for a 3rd grader isn't bad.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good.
Very good for a 3rd grader, yeah.
I tried reading larger books when I was in 3rd grade, but the only one that I found was The Wind in the Willows.
Yeah, that is technically bigger.
I learned real fast that it is there's some swears in there. And little Kyptan was so horrified of getting in trouble that he put it back in the bookshelf in his third grade classroom and never looked at it again.
What a sweet little Kyptan we made.
Yeah, and then it went on to Wizard of Earthsea and The House with the Clock in its Walls. I don't know if you guys ever read it. That whole series, which is kind of
Yeah.
spooky mysteries.
Didn't that have a horrible adaptation?
Yeah, with Jack Black. It
Yeah.
wasn't horrible. It wasn't.
No.
It was.
Okay.
It was kind of.
I heard a rant that might have been biased.
It wasn't great.
Yeah, no, it was not great. So, Kyptan, since we started with you, how about you tell us about your favorite magic system?
It's so hard to pick a favorite magic system, but because I know that Red is going to pick one of my favorites, I'm going to go little bit off field. And I'm going to take the Recluse Saga by L.E. Modesitt and its order and chaos magic, which subverts a fun trope in that the good mages are black and the bad mages are white, though it's not that simple, and it turns out that if you're a really good mage, you're some shade of gray. You learn to use both sides of it, even if you're only born with the ability to manipulate one side. But I like the way that he gets into little imaginative bits of physics, and none of his mages are ever identical. Every mage has a unique affinity for basically the fundamental forces of nature in some form or another. Some air, some earth, some fire, some smithing, some woodcrafting, and some as weird as like the strong nuclear force. Whatever.
No, like the physics strong nuclear force.
Yeah. Like he really some have like an affinity for electromagnetism. Some have an affinity for light. It's fun. It's really fun.
I like that in his book, his magic system kind of invades everything. Like he talks about how the magic is in the ocean and how it's under the mountains. It's everywhere. There's nowhere that's not included in it.
Every piece of matter in his universe is composed of the magic system. And sometimes you can see it. Sometimes you just have to trust the mages that it's there. But it when you're thinking about the magic, you definitely think about his world in a different way.
So is magic the chemistry of the world?
There's absolutely chemistry. Things like steam engines work differently in his world because of the magic is so pervasive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember reading one of those where he has to organize chaos. And so it's organized chaos, but then it's still chaos. And then it just messes things up for other people.
Is it kind of a yin-yang thing?
It's very much a yin-yang thing.
Yes, very much. I agree.
Order is preservation and stability, and it's and yeah, you be quiet. It's not your turn yet. And it's also like perfect stillness and like a frozen universe. And chaos is heat and flame and destruction, but also it's change. And so
and
both are necessary. Yes, it's ruin as well.
Yep.
Chaos it creates an aura around every chaos mage. And that's such a really fun little flavor bit of their lives, is that like food goes rancid before it can reach their mouth if they're a strong enough mage.
How do they eat?
Carefully,
and they can't enjoy wine because it turns before they're able to like raise it to their lips. But yeah, it's really fun.
Huh.
Now I will add the disclaimer that Modesitt is not the kind of writer for everybody. Some people find him tedious, and I did recommend him once, and the person said it was the worst book he'd ever read. So
well, Let me just say on the
That was
record
it.
that person is wrong.
Yeah.
We can't all have good opinions.
True.
Yeah, he's a frat bro. Lovely guy, but yeah, just not what he was looking for.
Fair.
Yeah.
But it's a magic system with a lot of philosophy. It's fun. Now
Let
you can
me.
go, Chesky.
Yeah, sorry. Let me talk about this one of my. It's a great one. I don't know if it's one of my favorites, but it is up there. It's the Split Infinity series by Piers Anthony. Just little content on that book, warning there, but it's really good. One of the things is it's two worlds, kind of like a sci-fi world and a magic world, and they both exist in the same spot at the same time. And the main character luckily gets to move over from the science fiction side to the magic side. And in this world, there are certain people, and everybody who can do magic does it uniquely. But you can only do a spell once, and then you have to do that spell a different way. So for him, he is kind of like song or rhyme or music. So his magic is infinitely kind of variable, but he can't make the same rhyme twice. He has to come up with a new one every time. And that really made me, it was good, right? I mean, because you think about it, lots of magic in books is kind of like, oh, it's just repetition. It's the same over and over again. And this is completely different. It has to be every time.
That's interesting.
Yeah. They're small books. They're not thick or tough. But there's more than just like he's that. There's a potion. So every potion that this lady makes has to be completely different. One summons demons, one does amulets, one does lines. It's all very unique and it's varied. That's all I can say. But it was great.
I can't imagine Modestit writing that song music.
Yeah.
That's that. I can't imagine him writing song magic that way. Because he wrote song magic in a way where the protagonist was not smart enough to come up with new songs on the fly and has to like basically just do things to the tune of like the Battle Hymn of the Republic or just change a couple words around in a common song.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, if you've read Piers Anthony, you kind of know what his book is going to be like, but it was good. So, good magic system there. Little Red, what's your favorite?
So, I think the most interesting magic system I've come across has to do with Mistborn, the first one. I want to be Mistborn. I want to use coins as weapons. I want to fly through the air and magically soothe people's emotions and heal and be super strong. But it's Brandon Sanderson is very, very careful with the way he develops his systems. And the characters are so creative in the way they use the physics of the world to control their environment and to affect other people. And so it's just I just like how strict it is, even though like Tolkien has a pretty soft system and the wizard shows up and says whatever, but it was just really fun to see how he made rules and figured out how he could get his characters to break the rules within the rules or something. Like a haiku poem, you have 5, 7, 5 syllables, but you can do anything you want within that 5, 7, 5 for your lines. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Sure.
So that would be my favorite magic system. And it's a pretty hard one. But I also like the soft system of Narnia still.
Ooh.
Well, I like portal magic for one, but I like talking animals. And I
Portal
like
magic is great.
I like Deus Ex Machina moments in my books every once in a while, it's always nice to have God show up and fix everything.
Very true.
Or to have Santa show up and hand out magic items.
Right? So, I mean, there's a place for both soft and hard magic. But like I said, I like the discipline that Brandon Sanderson uses in his magic systems. They're very structured, but he still finds ways to break the rules. So, super impressed with that.
Cool as being a Mistborn would be, I think I'd rather be a Farukamist.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're wrong. Sorry.
Well, I don't know. It says 2 verse 3 here, or 2 verse 1 here. So
Just because I'm in the minority doesn't mean that I'm wrong.
I would love to be able to fly. Actually fly.
Yes.
And I'm
That's
pretty
true.
sure the Faruchemists can do that.
I don't think so.
Faruchemists.
Farukamist is how I say it.
I never listened to any of the audiobooks, so
They're great.
Okay.
What's his face from Stormlight
Yes.
Archives?
Yes.
What his name is. He does them.
Kate Redding and Michael Kramer.
Kate Redding, I don't think does at least the first 3. I think.
Well, I just know that they're Stormlight Archive.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
soft or hard magic, guys, and what makes you prefer one or the other?
I like a harder side to my magic. I won't lie. I like a magic that has rules and that you can make theories about and have fun with. Like, you can actually construct theories, maybe even put numbers to things.
I'm just seeing you
Yeah.
with a notepad and a calculator while you're reading Mistborn.
I mean, you can totally do notepad calculator theorizing with Mistborn.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
mass and the forces and the weights, all of that stuff really lends itself well to physics analysis. Like, okay, how much could a little scrap of a girl push with her body weight and how fast?
Right.
But there is also the slightly softer side of that where it deals with magic strength.
Right.
But that's very minor in Mistborn compared to other things, right?
Well, they introduced the aluminum alloy, which I can't remember the name of right now.
Duralumin?
Right, and that kind of gives her like a workaround.
By the way, spoiler alert for Mistborn: Well of Ascension.
Oops.
Yes. Well, yeah, the Duralumin gives you the flash burp, the flash power, but even is just in general, like Elend and Vin are not at the same power level with their pushes. He can just push more with his body weight than she can,
right.
even if
but
they
you
were
can
the same.
still put genetics to that.
You can. You still can.
Yeah,
that is true.
So, more spoilers for the Mistborn series. And this is not related to the magic. Well, it is and it isn't. When Vin's mom is sitting there with her earring, the earring in Vin's ear, in her ear, and the baby is dead. Was she giving her Mistborn powers?
No.
But it
or
was
no.
It was a hemorrhagic spike.
It was a
well, I know
hemorrhagic
that,
spike.
but
No, Vin already had the Mistborn powers, and with the addition of her dead siblings, allomantic power, she could pierce copper clouds.
Yeah.
Okay.
It took having 2 gifts, even a very diminished gift, like the earring.
I feel like a dummy now.
Hey,
it's fine.
This is part of the hard versus soft. I like the hard magic system.
These are the kind of discussions you can only have about hard magic.
Yeah,
that's true.
Sometimes I think the systems that I like they're hard magic systems, but I can only see the soft side of it. Like I know that the wizards can do a lot of things, but I can't come up with all the things the wizard can do. But when I read it, then it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense that he can do, X, Y, and Z versus pulling something else out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where you don't know all the rules, but you know they're there, or some kind of rule is there at least.
I think one of my favorite universes kind of falls under that, which is the craft sequence. Like, there's a lot of explanation about that there are rules and that there are contracts and protocols, and like some things are easier than others, blah blah blah. But at a deep level, there's not a lot of reasoning why certain things are easier or harder.
Yeah.
There's like laws, there's a law of magical entropy, but
why is
you're
there
not
law
sure.
of
You're
magical
not sure.
entropy?
You're not sure why someone can dive into a mountaintop and enter like this dreamscape realm where they can reform their body. You're not sure why that's a thing that people can do in this investment bank. Like,
The power
but
of banking.
The
But
power of thinking.
I mean, that's what craft is about, basically. In a large part, it's about the power of banking and lawyers. And
Yeah.
of course, you can't explain all the minutia of banking and legal systems, but you can still make a fun book about them.
Is this the one that Hierophant recommended on the rec one?
Yes,
Yeah.
he did.
And he was talking about how the main character is a employer lawyer or something. I don't know. It was just like,
Necromancer lawyer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounded
All,
interesting.
pretty much all lawyers in this world are, to a degree, necromancers.
That's wicked.
And they
But they're
kind
not
of
evil
rule the
necromancers.
world.
They're just businessy necromancers.
They're very businessy necromancers, yes.
Oh, that's precious.
They wear suits.
Well, I mean, there's no rule you can't wear a suit as a necromancer.
But how often do you see it done? Not often.
Yeah.
Uh,
And one of the most powerful of them is a gay skeleton.
how do you?
You just
Never
don't ask
mind. I'm just not even going to ask.
That's the
just not gonna
soft side of the magic system there.
Don't want to know.
He wears all red, okay?
So is he actually gay, or are you just assuming he's gay?
No, he's actually gay. Like they talk about his
Gayness?
minor. They talk about one of his relationships. Yes, from before he was a skeleton.
Okay. Yeah, the whole and obviously one of my favorite fantasy novels is all Deus Ex Machina because it's the Five Gods series. So
Yes,
and that's a very soft system too.
I mean
So
that's a world in which gods can inhabit humans. So
Right.
So do you prefer soft? Oh, you would prefer hard, you said, right?
Well, it just no, I mean, it's hard for me to say because I like maybe it's mood related. I'm not sure. I like both. If it's I think it has to do with the characters. So a character-driven novel, I don't care about whether it's hard or soft. And there's a lot of really good character-driven novels that are soft magic. And not that Brandon
Tamara
Sanderson,
Pierce is so super soft magic, and she's one of my
yes.
favorites.
Very
Right,
soft.
and
Yeah.
so it's not. And Brandon Sanderson does write good characters, but I would say that you can't talk about soft magic systems like you can talk about hard magic systems, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And also, his best characters, Brandon's, I mean, are not in Mistborn. I don't think, anyway. I much prefer like Adolin and
I mean,
Shallan.
Stormlight is his masterpiece.
Well, yeah.
And it's
But I
definitely
even
true,
prefer
though.
I even prefer Warbreaker as far as the characters go.
Oh, okay.
I think it's the best romance I've seen written by a man ever. Like most men are terrible at writing romances.
That is high praise.
That is high praise.
Robert Jordan's
Are
his
horrible.
relationships are so terrible. I just hate it. Like the whole time I'm like, what?
They're so bad.
They're so bad. The only one that's even kind of viable is the one with Matt and
Tuon?
yes,
Tuon?
thank you.
Really? You find that one the
It's
most
kind of no,
Okay,
it's
believable?
kind of. I said
spoilers.
I basically we should put at the beginning of this episode if you have not read.
Spoilers for Wheel of Time,
Everything.
Mistborn.
No, I like.
But that's
oh,
oh sorry.
no, I was just gonna say I think I like the slightly harder because I just don't enjoy the the Deus Ex Machina where it can just come out of nowhere and you have no expectations and then it's solved and you're like, well, that's slightly underwhelming, you know. Yeah, you did it, but I have no idea why or how it was supposed to come that way. You know, I like being able to see it a
Yeah.
little bit, even if I can't see the exact path it's going to take.
So Tamara Pierce does it in a way where generally, if someone's going to be solving problems with magic, you see them learning about magic. You see them like becoming
Right.
accredited in their craft. You see them like teaching others about magic. And so like you can just kind of get that she can do more and more things over the course of the books.
Right. Yeah,
And
I
like
liked that one.
that's
that I read.
fine. But she never pulls a full-on Deus Ex Machina on you. She never has the protagonist like wipe out a city or something.
But there are actual gods that show up, so I don't know if that's actually correct. I mean,
Spoilers
dad-
for the Immortal Quartet.
Yeah, I
Dana's
never read that one yet. Come on.
it's called the Immortals, for God's sake. And no, it shows up in the first book. In the very first book, a god shows
Yeah,
up.
I
Yep.
know that one. Yeah,
Spoilers for the Immortals Quartet. Um,
and Alana.
Dean never destroys a city. She never destroys a whole city.
Oh no.
And plenty of time is spent on basically that whole book is about her magical education.
Right. So apparently, guys, it's either the swears or the spoilers for me. I'm sorry.
Spoilers this time around, so
Just, give me a few minutes. I'll probably come up with a swear.
But I absolutely love some soft magic systems, and I feel like not everybody thinks this about me. And so I do want to point out that I love Tamara Pierce, and I like The Witcher, which is semi-soft, semi-hard. Lord of Light is one of my favorite science fantasies, and super soft. A lot of that is about basically the power of philosophy, a little bit of the protagonist being a tricky guy, and just strength of will. And you really have to believe the philosophy of the book to get the point. Like if you're not on board for what the book is saying, you're not going to be on board and you'll call some things a Deus Ex Machina. But if you're willing to like extend your credit towards the author making this point, then I don't think you can call it a Deus Ex Machina.
yeah, maybe.
So it's really it's driven by the characters and the storytelling. Soft doesn't mean bad, it just means you can't randomly solve every problem with it without explaining how.
Well, on that topic, Kyptan, you said science fantasy.
I did.
How do you feel about subgenre? How many subgenres can you go down before you've hit too many?
I can go real far down.
No way.
Look, I used to have tests where they would ask us to start all the way up at orders and kingdoms and go all the way down to species, while given like a picture of a plant.
So would you relate that to genres in books then? You start with like fantasy and go down? Yeah. Fantasy, old school fantasy, low magic fantasy.
I mean, at
extra
the top,
low magic fantasy
at the
underneath
top,
that,
you have to have fiction.
That's true. Very top is fiction.
Yep. That's the defining thing. Is this real or is this some expanse of the imagination? And I go for the ones that are the imagination. I get enough in my textbooks that are the other kind. I got news, I got journal articles, I got nonfiction enough in my real life. So I like to enjoy my recreation with fiction. And then okay, so there's fiction with extra bits in it and fiction with
Extra
just fake
bits.
people. And
So like
I'm not
alternate history.
I'm not interested in the fake people. I want the extra bits. And the first of those is like alternate history, where nothing new happens, but something different happens. And like, how would the predictable patterns of humanity have changed or have unfolded if this one key event in our history was slightly different, like the US losing World War II? Like, how would the occupation probably have proceeded? So you get men in a high castle. And
Right.
that's fun.
Yeah.
That's good fantasy. But then you get to the end of the Man in the High Castle and you're like, is there time travel in here?
I've only watched the first season, so
And I haven't. So do you feel like all
It's
these
not a book that lends
subgenres?
itself well to sequel seasons.
No.
well, yeah, it's like 100 pages. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
very long.
Yep. But yeah, you're like, wait, is there time travel in here? And then the book ends.
Great.
So my favorite alternate history book is Dies the Fire, which is the beginning of the Changes series, which is broken into several different trilogies. It's by S.M. Sterling. And basically, quick chemical reactions stop working. So fire
Oh.
works, but gunpowder doesn't.
Steam power
And
doesn't.
what?
And steam power doesn't.
And steam power doesn't, right? And begins in 1997 in Portland. And a plane crashes out of the sky. And it's Corvallis, not Portland, that it starts. And you have a coven of witches and you have the Catholic Church. And it's like, what happens if all of a sudden you had to completely rebuild civilization, like with all these people? There's bubonic plague. It's great.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think
Oh.
the only alternate history I've read is the Temrare series, at least the first book, where it's Napoleonic Wars but with dragons.
My favorite alternate history, there's two. One is by Charles Stross, and it's the Merchant Queen series. And it's portal fantasy where the protagonist has the ability to jump between this world and an alternate history version of our world, by looking at a certain pattern. And the alternate history version of the world is like basically in the 1300s, except England had to flee the European continent because France had invaded them. so they full on moved into the Americas, like the whole government. Or at least I think that's what happens. It's kind of confusing.
Sounds pretty similar to a darker shade of magic. Just instead of alternate history, it's alternate world.
And it turns out that like her family, who she's been estranged from without knowing, because her mother like tried to hide her daughter away in Boston from this medieval world. I'm now realizing that I completely misrepresented the world by confusing it with a third world in the same universe. And her family's like drug runners. They start in Colombia with the drugs. They pop over into this medieval fantasy world and run the drugs there using like a network of slave labor / peasants to move drug up from South America into the United States. And then once it's in the United States, past the border, they pop it back into our world and sell it.
That reminds me of a short
One way to
story
use
by
Portal.
Ursula Le Guin called Changing Planes. And you have to go into an airport, and I don't remember exactly the details, but you go to a different plane, and so there's all these different planes, like there's a Santa Claus plane, I'm pretty sure, where there's people
Okay.
making toys, and you like loot it and bring it back to our plane and sell it. And just stuff like that. And the Canadians are like, every country, like depending on your culture, basically what it is, there's a different way to change planes. And the Canadians have this thing about how, wow, the Americans have to actually go sit in an airport to change planes and eat bad airport food and get indigestion in order to change planes. Anyway, and it's like I want to say it's probably about 50 pages, maybe not even that long, but it's really funny.
So yeah, that's super interesting political portal fantasy.
Oh yeah. Well, she was very political. Like most of her
Yeah.
writing is super political.
No, but so is that Charles Stross series that I was recommending.
Oh.
So I wonder
for the heavy
if there's something which I don't know attracts political writers to magic systems of one sort or another.
Oh, hold that thought. So we've spoiled
Okay.
Mistborn.
We
Spoiled Wheel of Time.
Are we going to spoil Sword of Truth
the
now?
Immortals.
What?
We spoiled the Immortals.
Yep.
Immortals.
Yeah, spoiled the Immortals.
Making notes.
Which one are you gonna spoil next, so we know to mark it beforehand?
I mean, it's hard to talk about magic systems without spoiling the book.
It is a little hard. I thought I managed
I
it
also
with
don't
Recluse.
care enough. And I don't think the Deus Ex Machina in Immortals is really a spoiler. To say a god shows up doesn't explain what's
God show up at various points all over Tamora Pierce's world.
Right.
But not in Circle of Magic, really.
Super magic beings. That's what they are.
Yeah.
So that there. I will continue to keep a running list. So I think that political writers probably are attracted to portal magic, and because it allows you to compare and contrast.
Yeah.
S.M. Sterling is pretty political, too, and
to so completely change a character's surroundings to the point where they're literally in a different world. I mean, that's such a good tool.
Right. C.S. Lewis was not political, though. But he was also
writing. Yes, he was.
Well, I guess he probably was a little bit.
He absolutely was.
I would say he was more of an evangelist.
Evangelism is just religious politics.
Okay, well, that's fair. If you're going to define it that way, then yes, he was political.
That is a split hair there, for sure.
So, are you saying that religions are political, or that politics is religion?
Yes, I am. I'm saying both.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, because there's also politics that are just with people being together. Politics happen, like office politics.
I mean, you're going to tell me that there's no religious aspects of office politics? Because there sure were in my office.
Not in mine.
Probably can be.
I mean, there could be, but
at the very least, there's there's things that you have to do for office food environments to accommodate people of different religions.
I work at a restaurant, so
I don't know what kind
Yep.
of office food you're getting, but we just have a fridge, and you put what you want in it,
well, but
and then you take what you want out.
if you had an Orthodox Jew working there, they
Exactly.
can't.
Or
But they
someone
could put
celebrating
their own
Or
food in the fridge and then
or
take their own food out.
no,
No,
you
it,
They
it
can't.
would
can't?
it would be contaminated and unclean if you put it near the wrong
Yep.
foods.
Oh, see, I don't know enough about Orthodox Judaism to know that.
Yeah, you have to have a meat fridge and a dairy fridge.
Yep. They
They
cannot
all
mix.
keep a completely different set of utensils and
Mm-hmm.
plates. I'm not sure how strict Muslims are, but they also have a very strict diet, to
Yep.
be halal.
Right. This is very far off of our topic of etiquette. We should probably veer back that way.
We probably should.
All right. Last
So-
thought here. One of the
Con-
thoughts.
Continuing with my subgenre classification, which I'm thinking that we just took a pause in.
Sure.
But continuing the subgenre classification, after you get to alternate histories, you get to the stuff where there's the new elements aren't just what if things had gone differently, but what if the world actually worked in a slightly different way? Like what if there's a new technology or a discovery of magic or something that changes the way that the world interacts?
But you would
that-
still
that-
put that under alternate history, or just saying
I
in
would
an
not.
alternate
I'd say
history?
I'd say that's new. Some people would call that speculative fiction. Some people call it sci-fi. Some people call it fantasy. But that's where you
Magical realism.
that's where you start getting down into the sci-fi and fantasy, possibly, or magical realism. The magical realism is often a very rare example of magic in a world. Like maybe there's one person who's magical, and like maybe it affects their family, maybe their town, but it doesn't affect the world at large.
I don't know. I would put, like you said, fiction kind of at the top, and then I'd go into your historical fiction, which would be, like you said, your alternate histories. If it's going to have magic or science fiction-y type things in it, then I would probably split those at the top into, so you'd have like fiction, and then underneath you'd have like alternate history, which is kind of plain and boring alternate history. What if this had changed, but no magical or scientific changes really? And then your fantasy, and then anything with fantasy or magic, and then your sci-fi on its own track as well. And then of course you could have alternate history fantasy, but I would put that more under fantasy than alternate history.
And I think there's
Personally.
also the split, and you have to talk about it, of if it takes place entirely in a secondary world or not. What used to be called, fine, I will admit that maybe this is out of date because it's definitely not used that commonly as a definition anymore. But high fantasy is defined as all of the action taking place in a secondary world entirely invented by the author. And low fantasy is when it takes place on some version of Earth.
And that definitely dates you right there.
Yeah.
So
Wheel of Time, under that definition, is low fantasy.
Song of Shannara is not, because it technically is supposed
It
to be
is.
No, that would be low
It's
fantasy,
low fantasy.
as well.
That's low fantasy as well.
That's a spoiler
Oh,
as well,
okay.
because you don't know that until like forever later. So many
Unless
book
you
series later.
ever listen to Craig complain about how there's a washing machine that's not rusted on the TV show.
We're going to assume that everybody has listened to that episode, but I just wrote it down.
Yep.
I actually don't like that series, by the way. I prefer the one that takes place in modern times. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Running with the demons,
Running with Demons, I think. That's the name of the series.
I mean, technically it's the same series.
Yes, but I liked
But
that.
no.
I like that. I liked those 3 books. I did not like the Shannara series. I tried to.
I don't
tried really hard,
particularly
Craig.
enjoy that definition of high fantasy, but that's probably because I'm equating epic fantasy with high fantasy versus
Yeah.
low and high being where they take place.
I mean, nobody likes being called low.
Right? Yeah, especially books that you love.
Especially books that you love. Nobody likes it being applied to their books.
I don't mind.
Well, you're a very nice person.
Well, you get right out of here. We mind, and that's what we do. And we argue about pedantic details about books.
I'm not saying I won't argue about pedantic details. I'm just saying I don't care if it's called low because I really like
I
Outlander.
don't personally mind.
No, I don't. Well, I like Outlander. Speaking of alternative histories,
I like Dresden.
Right.
Dresden's great.
I like Wheel of Time.
Oh, that also does take place.
Still don't like calling them low, but that's
people get really upset when you call
get.
Wheel of Time low fantasy. They get really upset.
I think that's probably because not everybody knows the true definition of low fantasy, and when you're saying it,
I mean, well,
they might be taking it wrong.
Are we going by Merriam-Webster or are we going by Oxford English Dictionary? Like, are we going prescriptivist, like by the basis of literary critique, and like, or are we going by, what people use in everyday life?
Right. So low just means common.
Well, low means on Earth.
It means on Earth, technically.
That's basically
but
all.
What I'm saying is, it means that it's like
in everyday life. It means
pathetic,
not super fantastical.
Yeah.
Right. But
see, I don't think that when you
criticism.
say like low fantasy, it means like there's a low amount of fantasy elements in it. Versus
Means that,
high
like,
fantasy, there's a high amount of fantasy in it, which is not like the truth, but
yeah.
Oh, guys. What about steampunk and cyberpunk? What's the difference? Fight.
Steampunk is steam powered with brown, and cyberpunk
With
is
sepia.
internet powered with disco colors.
But also with a lot of like concrete, cement, dirt, and like grunge.
You definitely have to have
Cyberpunk
cement.
is definitely dirty and gritty and ugh. That's the thing I don't like about Cyberpunk. It's not clean. It upsets me with the dirtiness that it keeps describing all the time.
So would you create a new genre called clean cyberpunk, or would you just? I mean,
they call that solar punk. They call that solar punk.
Solar punk.
Because what we really need is another genre to fight over.
Solar punk is more optimistic, isn't it? Isn't that the general definition for solar punk is books with an optimistic feel?
Yes, with an optimistic future.
Yeah. So what if you had your cyberpunk?
Usually the world is just cloudy and foggy and smoggy. And all the oceans are polluted, and all the rivers are clogged, and all the deserts are expanding. And it's a pretty bad future. Oh, and so everywhere is a refugee camp. Yeah. Ready Player One.
Which was bad.
Snow Crash.
What if you had a cyberpunk world, but like it was a little bit cleaner than a regular one? Would you re-subgenre that, or would you just leave it under cyberpunk?
I'd probably still leave it under cyberpunk.
Okay.
But I would say that it was weird. I'd say it's atypical cyberpunk.
Okay. Because it would be, truly.
It would be.
So atypical cyberpunk. We got a new subgenre. Just writing that down.
For all you people out there who care, there's a new subgenre.
I would be okay making a new subgenre of clean cyberpunk.
When where Kit doesn't have to take meds to exist in it.
Yeah.
So The Expanse, guys. Let's go. I mean, I realize that's sci-fi, but
The Expanse has bits of cyberpunk in it.
Right.
Just little bits.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Classify it as cyberpunk, though.
I mean,
it's not enough. It's enough to say it has cyberpunk influences, but it's not enough to say it's cyberpunk.
But at the same time, I do find it kind of hopeful.
Yes.
In a lot of respects. Like, we're going out there and things go really wrong, but we're also trying to make things better. And in a lot of ways, things are getting better. I mean,
Yep.
so maybe it's solar punk influenced. Bite me.
This is the
Bite me.
I
tough
mean,
part.
I mean, the Expanse does have like basically endless fusion power, which is a
Right.
very hopeful thing, but it's not exactly solar punk because it's not solar.
And I wouldn't think that
What?
it's not really focused on that as
Solar
the
punk is explicitly non-nuclear.
Oh,
Like the solar punk genre, they will almost never have nuclear devices or nuclear reactors.
but isn't the sun a big nuclear
you
reactor?
that is too sciencey for this. Get out of here. Leave us with our fiction and
No,
our fantasy and our dreams.
a lot of solar punk has like fears of nuclear annihilation and nuclear contamination, and they write things where it's a hopeful future where everyone can subsist on free energy from the sun.
But I'm
And
just saying, isn't the sun a big nuclear reactor?
yes,
Kind of.
Okay. So there is
yes,
nuclear fission in it.
nuclear fusion.
Yeah,
Yes,
fission would
fusion.
be worse, I believe.
Yes. Okay, fine.
Fission.
Do I need to start spelling things too now?
No, I can hear you fine. But
Miles with a Y, not Miles with an I.
Yeah.
The other way around.
Well, it's Miles with a Y in Tamara Pierce.
okay, now you guys are going off on a tangent that even I missed. So let's roll back. Roll back somewhere for me.
Roll back, roll back. Okay. So let's just cut that. And
Put a mark at the 15-minute mark.
but no, I do think that the defining lines between solar punk and cyberpunk and steampunk and a gaslamp fantasy are can be really small sometimes.
And you forgot Flintlock.
Oh, Flintlock fantasy too.
Yeah, the deeper you
Flintlock
go in
fantasy, the
your
powder
subgenre,
mage.
yeah, the deeper you
Gaslamp
go, the
Gaslamp
smaller the
fantasy is
changes are.
Girl Genius, which is a lovely genre that Girl Genius is a great example of. Go
See,
check
I
it
would
out.
put that more under steampunk, even though it's not all steam powered. It just
It is
feels more
Gaslamp
steampunkish to
fantasy.
me.
So explain to me the difference between the two.
Steampunk is much more of a sci-fi world in where the primary power organization is done through steam-powered machines.
And the
It's
color
really not
brown.
that simple. Yeah, and dirigibles.
Balloons.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Gaslamp Fantasy shares the dirigibles, but they're significantly more fantastical. There's death rays and there's more magic in the world.
So Chesky, because you've what's it called? The Shadow of Milk and Honey? The Shadow of Milk and Honey. Would that be
Oh, Shades of Milk and Honey?
Shades of Milk and Honey, yes.
Okay.
How would
You're
you
fine.
classify that one? I don't think Kip has read it, but
I haven't read it, but
I thought you
I
had.
would no, I've heard it recommended and my wife read it and liked it. I would put it as a historical fantasy, which is I think what Marie Robinette Kowal also labels it as. A book set in our past, but with fantasy elements or with fantasy in it, with magic in it.
So like Strange and Norrell would fall into that.
Yes, yeah, they would fall under historical fantasy. But historical fantasy can also be like it could be very similar to alternate history because it basically is. They're very very similar.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Trying to think of another shub. How about when B Sand comes out with his
Going
fantasy
straight to the
sci-fi
nicknames
book.
now, huh?
I've been calling him that for a while. On the Discord, by the way.
Sure.
When he comes out with his new or his Era 4, how will we classify it for Mistborn Era 4? Science fantasy?
Space
I would
fantasy.
call it still as fantasy,
mean-
just as general fantasy, because
It depends how much of the book takes place in actual space.
yeah. And I don't
So,
think the focus is going to be like science, like here's a machine that we built and it runs this way. Because science fiction is more, I mean, there's hard science fiction and there's low science fiction, but like it won't feel like it'll still be magic powered, right? All the machines would be powered through magic,
But
which would
with a
still put it
very
under fantasy.
scientific magic system.
But that,
But-
I mean, to be truthful, if I had fantasy, if I had magic
Fantasy has
powers
to be
all
in
of
the
a
name
sudden,
somewhere. You can't
I
just call
would
it
like,
sci-fi.
yeah, I would totally
but
science
what I was
that
going to
out.
say is that Mistborn Era 2, there is actual science versus the magic science. Because they have guns and they have
Radio.
trains.
I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I don't think you have to say, oh, if it has technology of any kind, then it's not fantasy. It can still be fantasy,
I agree.
but you can't.
But I
like,
think if
but
it
it's
takes place
backwards.
in
You can't
space, you
have.
got to put space in the name somewhere.
Well, you
Space
don't
fantasy.
have to, but you probably should.
It's like the Jedi are space wizards.
Yep.
Yep.
But I don't think you can go backwards. I don't think you could say, you know, like if it's. Oh, how was I thinking? I'm sorry. I was thinking like if it's got magic, then it's not sci-fi, but not back the other way. I'll just ignore that. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I had a thought and it lost it.
Oh, you're fired.
In
You're fired
Recluse,
from a very lucrative podcast.
in
I'm gonna
Recluse, the
support myself.
protagonist actually, this is spoilers for Recluse: Fall of Angels.
Okay.
The very first like order magicians that the series really starts to follow, they came from another world. They came from a universe which was pure sci-fi, and then they opened up a singularity in like their fighting and got dragged through into this world where their fusion reactors don't work and their ships can't fly. But it turns out that the crew that used to like interface with the neural networks of the ship now have the ability to interface with the reality of this world through magic.
It's kind of like The Expanse, because they have areas where physics just stop. Spoilers for The Expanse.
The Expanse never has areas where physics stop. It has areas where physics are unexplained.
Or overruled by other things.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you're overruling it, isn't that stopping it?
No.
No, it's still there.
No,
You're just
because
acting
physics still
stronger than it.
exist. The reader just doesn't understand them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Semantics. I think that
The normal rules of physics that we understand as real human beings stop applying in various parts of the Expanse.
And new physics get applied.
And then new mysterious magic physics happens.
yeah,
But it's all
semantics.
technically
It's basically
caused
magic.
by scientific organisms. So
No, I don't think that would classify as magic because it's all very
it's all
science
science.
based.
It's all science.
Science based.
It's saying sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. It's the corollary.
Okay, whatever. I disagree. I thought it was magic. Still think it's magic. You're wrong. Again.
Oh no. I think you're wrong here.
Indistinguishable. Clark's corollary.
So we're both wrong.
Well, I mean, I did
No,
in fairness say
not-
I only have bad opinions.
There's no meaningful difference. There's some small level of semantics, but in effect, on level of practicality, there's no difference.
Were those spoilers for Expanse? I
Yes.
don't think. Yes. Okay.
Probably.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. But I mean, so going back to sci-fi, the Vorkosigan series does not have hard sci-fi edge, but I never feel like I take a step outside science when I'm reading it. Does that
But
make
in a
sense?
but in a fun way, it does have at least one hard edge element in the nexus of interstellar travel.
Right.
The idea that you can only jump from one system to another system if there's these transfer points in between them, if there's these transfer nodes,
Right.
uh,
Aren't they
creates an interstellar map that's not based on their actual location of these solar systems because they're so far apart that humanity can't travel between them without using these transfer nodes.
uh,
Um,
I kind of okay, so what I'm
and
gonna
and
say
that,
is
and that causes military, political, all sorts of impacts, uh, which you can argue about and debate about, as you can do with all good hard magic things, uh, which are very hard edged.
I, my argument isn't that it's not. I'm comparing it with The Expanse. So, like, I never felt like I was in a fantasy, but that one
Mm,
part of The Expanse, I totally feel like I'm in a fantasy,
yes,
and I never once.
because in the Vorkosigan series, they understand it. Humans made this technology. They get
Okay.
how it works. They have names for it. They have job positions, which is like, oh, this is my 5D engineer. He's gonna figure out how to design this new class of ships, which are gonna get through these transfer points with slightly less energy.
Okay, you're right
Like
again, Kip.
it's lackluster. It's not lackluster. It's every day.
Right.
Understood.
All of this fantasy elements, the space fantasy elements in Vorkosigan, they're everyday things. It's like, okay, we have cryogenics, we have
Uterine
uterine
replicators.
replicators. Lovely. Lovely. We have nuclear bombs that leave places devastated for 1,000 years and glass them into the non-existence. Sure,
Genetics,
they're all
man, and cloning.
we yeah, we got genetics and cloning. These are all things that we can say, okay, yeah, I can see science getting there someday. And then there's the magic of the 5D transfer nodes which exist in the systems and are just it which are a fun way of interstellar travel. They're a fun way with real implications that I'm glad that she chose because it's interesting.
I just always thought they were black holes you could fly through when I was reading the books.
They're technically not black holes. You can fly through them if you like in like a spacesuit and nothing would happen to you.
Okay. Sorry, Chesky.
That's fine. I don't mind. I like
Yep.
listening. So
They're like invisible transit points unless you have uh the right like
tools.
5D detection tools, yeah.
There's something I was gonna connect that with. Talk amongst yourselves while I think of what I was gonna say.
Well, that sounded a whole lot like soft sci-fi because it
Oh, yeah.
doesn't delve into it too much, but it is sci-fi for sure.
It's definitely soft sci-fi. Um I'd call aspects of it military sci-fi. Because they really focus on military troops and maneuvers and fights. Uh, it genre skips around quite a bit,
I was gonna say
which
there's
is fun.
there's
It's
spy thrillers,
there's
there's
spy thrillers,
mysteries.
there's romance,
Mhm.
there's even a couple comedic ones.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and she's just very funny.
she
I
is
mean,
also just very funny, and I feel that there's a strong element of humor mixed into all of her books. And I think a lot
the
of people
bugs.
the
I don't think
Butterbugs,
that's a
yeah,
spoiler. Yeah, the butterbugs are amazing.
a civil campaign is a delight. And it's one of the more romance heavy of the books.
And you can pick up any book in the series, Chesky, if you just wanna pick up
I
a
don't know
civil
about
campaign.
that.
It's so funny.
I
It's
would not pick up a civil campaign without setting the ground first.
I think you can do
I would
it.
want to meet the characters beforehand before I see them do the crazy things they do in civil campaign.
But I think you can. I mean, it's possible.
Sure.
You
I
don't
like
have to.
reading things in order though, so I'll probably go that way.
Don't read them in the chronological order. Read them in the publishing order.
Publishing order, for sure.
Yeah, because there's a book before Shards of Honor, and it
Like
doesn't
400
make
years
sense really.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. It's interesting after you're familiar with the world, but that's about it.
But
So
I would say that it explores another aspect of sci-fi, fantasy, everything is what happens when a new technology changes the game.
that is
So
actually what I wanted to talk about.
so in Falling Free, it's all about what happens if spoilers. What happens when you invent artificial gravity and no longer need a race of people which you've genetically engineered to work in zero G? And they can't really survive in gravity.
I disagree with you. That is not a spoiler because that's literally on the back of the book.
It is on the back of the book. But yeah, what happens?
Well,
And
what
then
happens?
and you continue to meet. This is maybe a spoiler. You continue to meet the quaddies, the people with
Right.
4 arms and 0 legs. What happens to those quaddies over the intervening centuries of galactic evolution? And it turns out they kind of found a place for themselves. They've found out that asteroid mining and zero G construction of larger ships before they're complete is still a good way that they can be employed. But they came really close to getting genocided because a company said, oh, they don't matter anymore.
Right. So one of the things um one of the things I love about reading fantasy and sci-fi in general is that you get to explore these kinds of thoughts without involving your current political situation. You can escape, but you can still think about how do we overcome these issues or
Yep.
how do people work in a society? I can't believe I just said in a society.
We live in a society.
We do.
It is the truth.
But you conduct thought experiments in a very safe way that doesn't make people defensive.
Yeah. Like
Unless
what
you're reading The
kind
Dispossessed, and then you're
like
just
it would be a crazy level of corporatization to exist before corporations can write off genetically engineered humans as human tissue samples that they can just
right,
destroy out of hand.
right.
Like that would never happen on Earth currently.
That
Uh,
I have to
Currently,
echo
it would
Little
take
Red here.
it would take maybe a decade or something.
I was
think
just gonna say they're already copywriting people's genetic code, Kip.
think if we had the technology, people would be doing that with it exactly.
Yep.
But that is neither here nor there. So
Why do it, no? But it is because in the sense that it allows you
I mean,
to
yeah.
conduct a thought experiment.
well, I
There's
mean that they
there's
would do it
there's
here though. That's
there's
that part's
currently
neither.
moratoriums which would prohibit even the getting the genetically engineered human race part started. Also, there's no way we have the technology to replace legs with arms and have it function well right now.
So no CRISPR babies right now.
I mean, no, China's doing CRISPR with single genes. But
It's terrifying.
we're trying to get them to stop. The U.S. as a nation and the American bioethics panels are trying to get China to stop doing that because there's a very high amount of embryos that they create which have not the genetic helpful mutation, the thing that would have cured their genetic illness that these parents were suffering from, but
Mhm.
instead the gene inserts in the middle of a necessary gene and kills it, or maybe it kills several of them or several dozen of them, and the baby might be born with horrifying birth defects or with cancer by the time they turn 5. Those are
That
very likely outputs for like 60% of the embryos that they're using.
that's
Pretty horrible.
disturbing.
So yeah, it's not a medical treatment yet, and it shouldn't be treated like one, and we shouldn't be experimenting on actual human embryos.
I mean, it's almost Nazi because the Nazis did a lot of stuff kind of like that.
It's a scientist trying to go
I
faster
know.
than anyone else to get his name out there.
Uh,
Yep.
it's not good ethically. It's just
No,
not.
it's not good
Which is
ethically.
why. So
Which is why you should write about it in books first and see what the
exactly.
ramifications of that would be.
We wouldn't be
No.
ready for this without books like Brave New World. We wouldn't
Or
have the public collective consciousness if we went into this too fast.
or the whole thing with Miles and his brother in
Yeah.
the Vorkosigan saga, because there's a lot of
Yep.
and the Circadians. I don't remember exactly what they were.
Citagandins. Yeah.
Citagandins. Because they're that all of that stuff revolves around the ethics of genetic engineering and
And
I
then
mean, yeah,
there's even her short story like Mountains of Mourning,
right.
where you get into the societal trauma that Barrayar had as an irradiated planet, and how they had to enact brutal, incredibly brutal rules and customs in order to. I don't know if it actually helped them, if it was fear, if it was, I don't know. But they had horrible practices towards the treatment of mutants on Barrayar.
Right. Well, and it's very reminiscent of the Roman Empire. Well, a lot of ancient groups would expose their babies who weren't correct.
Yep.
I mean, the
Yeah.
Spartans did it too.
It has historical callbacks.
Is that spoilers?
For
I don't
history?
think so. No, not for history.
For Mountains of Mourning.
I don't think so. I don't think it
I
counts.
don't think so. No.
Okay. Yes, I'm spoiling history now. That's my amazing power.
No, because we all know that Mountains of Mourning is from the very beginning. We know that it's about a dead mutant child,
That's true.
and it's
And it's
not even really a mutant. It's just a kid with a hair lip.
yeah, I remember watching Gladiator with my mom, and Joaquin Phoenix has a hair lip, and she spent the whole movie saying, "Why is he playing the emperor? If he was actually born in Rome, he would have been exposed." I'm like, "Mom, calm down. I know
I don't
you're
actually
right,
know if
but
I don't actually know if that's politically correct or
he had a cleft lip that was
cleft
repaired.
palate. Yeah.
Cleft lip and palate. Sorry. I'm sorry if that's not
No,
I'm
I
just
said it
saying."
first. It was my bad.
Yeah. So he has a repaired cleft lip and cleft palate. And my mom was so mad about it because she's like, "He would never be emperor." I was just like, "Mom, it's a movie.
Yep.
Calm down." But she's right.
We have
If he had
surgery
been
for that
born,
now.
what?
We have surgery for it now.
Right? No,
Yeah.
but she is technically right that if
She is
he had
technically right. Yes.
been born in the Roman Empire, he would have been
Yes.
exposed
The
because
best
that's what
kind
they
of
did.
right.
But it's like nice that our world has moved beyond that, though.
Yes. Well, she was more upset about the historical accuracy than anything else.
Fine.
Although,
Fine.
if that's the one thing you take out of historical accuracy in that book or movie, there's a lot of stuff that isn't accurate.
We watched I, Claudius in school.
I've never seen that.
Haven't
Oh,
either.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was just us then.
I mean, you went to
Apparently.
weird schools. No offense.
That was public school.
That's still weird.
Oh my gosh, my kids' health class, they were watching Finding Nemo. And I'm like, are they actually teaching you anything
Okay, Finding
important?
Nemo. Is Finding Nemo fantasy?
Ooh. Yes.
Maybe.
I think there's even a branch of it that's like anthropomorphic fantasy.
Yeah,
Haha, there we go. It's fantasy.
I agree.
What do
I
you
agree.
guys think
Totally
about
fantasy.
what do you guys think about retelling old fairy tales in a more modern or for adults
I love The
aesthetic?
Little Mermaid, so
Don't get me started on The Little Mermaid.
oh.
I like the music. It has great
It's
music.
good until you think
Do
critically
you like
about it.
Ursula?
Yeah, I like her. She's great.
I love Ursula.
But I mean, I almost want to say she's the hero of the story. What is Ariel doing? She's like, oh, this cute biker dude rode into town. I'm going to get tattoos and piercings and run off and be with him, Dad. And her dad's like, that's not cool. And she's like, you're a tyrant. And I'm like,
I mean, did you see Eric's eyes?
no.
As a little teenager, I would have been starstruck by those eyes too. Okay.
Yeah, but are you going to change your whole way of life for him?
I mean, would I have been rebellious to my parents and maybe run away if they like destroyed all of my possessions? Maybe.
People have done that before. It's like a fact. Like that literally happens to people and they choose it.
Yeah.
But it's not a good message to send.
But
And then I can get married to him and get my voice back. I don't have to rely on just body language anymore.
Oh, we had this whole argument already. I'm sorry I even brought it up. No, you brought it up, Kip. This is your fault.
The Little Mermaid is a great adaptation of a classic fantasy novel.
The real one is much better.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
No, it is.
It just didn't have songs.
Well, Hans Christian Andersen isn't known for his music. I mean, he's known for his horrible endings.
Not everyone can be Tolkien, I guess.
That's true. I mean,
also, Ellie Modesitt always puts songs in his books. I never know what tune they're supposed to go to, so it never works for me. But
oh, maybe Todd can write us some music for the songs.
Okay.
We'll ask him. I'm sure he really cares what we think.
Magic System in Little Mermaid. How do we feel about that?
I'm sorry?
How do we feel about the magic system in The Little Mermaid?
Oh.
It's very soft. It can do anything it wants. You never know.
But you can't break your word. If you sign a magical contract, you're done.
That's a very common theme in magic in general.
Yep.
And so is naming things, like in the Wizard of Earthsea. It's very, very important to name things. And I think that has a powerful... It shows the power of something that's real. Like when you name something, you can deal with it.
Yep. And I do like the approach in the craft sequence where legalese is so convoluted that you can almost always wiggle out of something if you pay enough lawyers.
That might be true of just life as well, though.
It is. Unless
yes,
it's the IRS.
Contract is binding, but you can take it to court.
Oh, I have a story about that, but I can't tell it and have it go out on the internet, so I won't record it.
No. But like, could you imagine Ursula, Triton, and Ariel going to court about that document?
More fanfic by Kip.
I was saying earlier that I love tedium.
What's the video game? Phoenix something or other?
Phoenix Wright?
Is that the lawyer one? Yeah, Phoenix Wright.
Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney?
Yes.
Yes.
Phoenix Kip, Ace Attorney.
Now that I could see.
So go with the wrap up?
I think so.
I think that's good, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it was very lovely talking to you, gentlemen. I will see you on Tuesday.
Okay.
Assuming Huron's feeling better.
I hope so too.
Yeah. No fun being sick.
I hope it's not the Rona. I feel better, Huron! What about you? You guys have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
this has been the Legendary and Green Team. If you want to tell us how much you love us or criticize us and tell us how much we just suck, hit us up on Discord and think about becoming a Patreon member. That would be great if you can support us. Or if not, we are available on Reddit and Discord. Come join us. Thanks for listening. Bye.